In this week's Wood Heat Wednesday, I thought I'd share my top 5 tips and tools if this is your first winter heating with firewood. So tip number 1, before you even get your wood stove, get out and start cutting, splitting, and stacking that firewood so it's got plenty of time to dry. And cut more firewood than you think you're going to need. That way if you have a really cold winter, you got plenty of wood to last you through the year, and any wood that you don't burn that winter is just going to have more drying time. It should last you several years. Think of an old barn. I mean, these things have been around hundreds of years, and the key is just making sure you keep the moisture away. So getting your wood up and off the damp ground, and it should last you many, many years. Tip number 2, get yourself a thermostat for your stovepipe. It's really a valuable tool, especially when you're getting to learn your stove. It helps you figure out if you're burning in the ideal temperature ranges, making sure you're creating the least amount of creosote in your stove. It's also really nice when you're starting a fire. You can figure out when the temperatures start getting up to a decent range, and then you can start shutting down the air to your stove as you start getting that fire really going. The other nice part is you can figure out if things are getting too hot. Maybe you got too much air going to that stove or whatever, and you can dial things back and then reduce the risk of anything warping or getting damaged in that process. So tip number 3, I'd recommend brushing your chimney once a month that very first year. You can learn your burning habits. A lot of times people don't get wood put up early enough and don't end up with the most ideal dry firewood for that season, so you're creating a little bit more creosote. There's also a lot of times a little bit of a learning curve with running your stove and your setup. Sometimes you might have that thing dialed back too far, things are smothering a little bit. And with you being able to go out and do this monthly, you can monitor it, see how your burning habits are working out, catch any potential risk of a chimney fire early on and address those. Plus, once you start figuring out your habits, I mean, you could very well find out you only need to run a brush up and down that chimney once a year, and it's just a good, safe practice. Tip number 4. Invest some time and money into going over your safety gear. This includes things like your fire extinguisher, your smoke detectors, CO2 detectors. A lot of these things have expiration dates. For example, your smoke detectors, generally there's a 7-year lifespan on these. Of course, the batteries need to be replaced every so often. So go through all these things before the season starts. Make sure you have a good CO2 detector in place as well. These can be really helpful to catch if there's any sort of leak that might be happening with your stove. Or you might end up taking the ashes out of your stove into your ash bucket, forget about it, and this could potentially trigger that and help you catch that before things get too dangerous. So tip number 5, I'd recommend investing money in a moisture meter. These are such valuable tools, and they're really not all that expensive. A lot of times you get them $10 and up. For $30, you can get a pretty good rock solid one. And what these allow you to do is actually take an accurate reading on how dry that wood is. Ideally, you're looking for something 20% moisture or less. So if you're someone that goes out, cuts, splits, stacks your own firewood, really a fantastic tool in figuring out a good system for yourself. You can play around with different tree species, the way you stack your wood, the direction you stack your wood, and figure out which is the best way for you and getting that wood nice and dry before it ends up in the stove. If you're someone that purchases firewood, I'll tell you what, this tool will pay you back real quick. A lot of times guys will claim that they've been having this wood dry all year. They come drop the stuff off, you're loading up your stove, and you got water boiling off the ends of this because it's so wet. With the moisture meter, you can take a reading before it even gets unloaded off the truck or money's ever exchanged and actually figure out if that wood is truly dry. Maybe it's not. Maybe you can work out a little discount on that, or you can just send them on their way and go find someone else that's got some dryer wood for you. So this tool is really a nice, valuable tool. Save you some money and save you some headaches and actually give you solid numbers on whether your Firewood's dryer. I would really recommend investing some money in a good pair of gloves. I personally prefer using a good pair of stick welding gloves. You can a lot of times get these things 10, 12 bucks at a lot of stores. A good thick, heavy leather, so it really protects your hand against the heat, as well as potentially getting slivers. And a lot of times they come up your arm cutaways, so if you end up bumping your arm up against the stove door or something like that, it really helps keep you protected. So one last little tip I would recommend is pay attention to the humidity in your house. Really does make a big difference. Things get too dry, it's not ideal for your health. You get drier skin, a lot of static shocks, and the heat just doesn't feel quite as warm. Sometimes you'll look at the thermostat and it'll be pretty warm in the house, but it just doesn't feel all that warm. And humidifier can really play a big factor. They got tea kettle type ones that you can set on top of your stove, that every time your stove's running, it's putting moisture in the air. You can also get humidifiers to put in particular areas of your house, your main living areas. And then they even have ones that can tie into like the main ductwork of your entire house and really help regulate things pretty easily, but makes a big difference. There's a lot of ups and downs that go along with wood heat, especially your first year, trying to figure out, you know, getting your wood dry, running that wood stove, you know, when to close things up, and how much wood to load in that stove. Sometimes you just want the temperatures to come up a little bit more. You think you got to add a couple more pieces of wood. Next thing you know, you're cooking yourself out. You got windows wide open, trying to cool the place down. But stick with it. I promise you, wood heat, at least for me, my all-time favorite. There's just something so special about it. It warms you to the bone. You crawl into bed at night, even the lowest layer of sheets are nice and toasty warm. There's just something so special about it, I guess. So these are just some of my top tips that I thought would be helpful for someone that's just getting into running a wood stove. Did I miss anything? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear some of your recommendations or tips to go along with that. I think that's what makes this community great, you know, is all the comments that are left here and different ideas and perspectives that are shared. So anyways, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.